Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I am your host, Marianne Petrie. This episode of Slam the Gavel is sponsored by CPS Protect Consulting Services. A child protective services case is one of the most frightening experiences for any parent. Don't face it alone. Face it with confidence with Urgent Assist by CPS Protect. You can have access to former CPS investigators to make sure you preserve your rights and protect your family. If you're facing CPS involvement and aren't sure where to turn, their child welfare consultants can help you. Visit cpsprotect.com/subscribe and enter the coupon code Slam the Gavel for 60% off your first year of Urgent Assist. And this is available in all 50 states. I have another announcement. Bradley's mother, Narcus Golan, passed away in the fall of 2022. Bradley is autistic and needs structured routine and therapies he receives for his autism 6 days a week. However, Italy just entrusted Bradley to the Italian social services. If he is ruled to go back, he will then face the next 3 to 4 years in the Italian foster care system where he can't speak nor understand the language. He will then be taken away from the only family he has ever known. Please call Governor Hochul at 518-474-8390 to keep Bradley here safe in these United States. That's 518-474-8390. Hashtag keep Bradley safe. And also, please go to this site, pleasedoyourjob.com. We need 2,500 more signatures to get a case reopened. Pleasedoyourjob.com. I have a brand new guest on. I have Bea Marney on. She is a federal lobbyist for foster youth. She's a mom, and she's telling her story 2.5 years after the fact, as she now understands what really happened to her. And apparently the county police and CPS were working in tandem to take her child away. So I welcome you, Bea Marney. You know, I'm very sorry for what has happened to you, and I welcome you to Slam the Gavel.
Thank you.
Thank you. You know, this was a long time for you to tell your story. And how did you come to tell it?
So I did not understand why they could do the things that they were doing after I had experienced some of the things that left me in shock and definitely was traumatic, where I started having strokes and had a brain injury. So I had to recoup from that in order to be able to survive and understand their motive and what really, no one thinks there's an agency within our government that is being given trillions of dollars to protect families, and they're the ones we need protection from. So no one understood that this, or not anyone in my family, that this could actually be happening to a very healthy, happy family with, you know, I have a college graduate, a daughter, a son who is, you know, started college but couldn't function because he got so depressed from this, and actually said, I want to become an FBI agent or a CIA agent so I could protect families better. But then realized, he said, do you think they will kill me if I'm not corrupt like them? He already at a 19-year-old age understood what our government is doing to families for profit. And I did not want him to understand that. And then we still have the youngest that is still missing. And I call it missing because he was originally kidnapped by every statute of criminal law. There was no reason to, not even the police and CPS said they could hide or steal him. The people that did, which is a whole nother story, but they basically said, go pick up your child, but nobody would tell me where he was. He still doesn't understand what's happening because it's like the little fairy tale of Hansel and Gretel, where they're fattening him up because I'm not completely removed. I've been giving them a fight like you won't believe. And, you know, it could have been really easy. I could have just, they would dangle the child in front of me and I could have just jumped through all their hoops and they would have had me probably in their jurisdiction, which is outside of our home state, in a mental hospital, probably drugged up. And if you don't believe this is happening, look at Britney Spears.
And there was another mom too, Elizabeth Harding, they did this to. I don't know if you heard
Right.
of her.
I have now recently, because I understand how easy these traps are. I have looked at the other stories, but they don't do it to everyone. They have to pick a certain amount of population to do it to, because if they did it to everyone, this would certainly stop.
Mm-hmm. You just gave me the chills when you said your son said, if I joined the CIA or FBI, could they kill me? Because I'm not
Well,
going to be corrupt. It just gave me
yeah.
the chills.
Yeah, so we thought, you know what, why don't you just stay in Alabama in our home, stay in our small town, and just let mom handle this. So I've been circling around Virginia, where my child is, within Maryland and DC, and I have not been able to go back home because my son is in now, after he was uh, hidden in Los Angeles for about 8 months. He was taken to Virginia and given away by the people who had originally abducted him. And the court papers say that nobody wanted him, and they told him his mom didn't want him. But I have not seen him or been able to talk to him since they have taken him illegally. So I can't explain to him the truth. And could you imagine being a 13-year-old boy with autism, ADHD is what he's diagnosed with, and being told every day that your mom didn't want you? I'm sure I'm not his favorite person right now, but that is absolutely not the truth. I've even sold, property, houses, to get all the equity out, to do whatever they want me to do, to hire whoever I need to hire to make this stop. And it seems like every move I make, they know what to do when I get there. And go do a psych evaluation. When I show up, they say, nope, we're not going to give it to you. And we're going to say that you didn't comply. But then I'm already ready for them and have it all recorded. So when it's recorded, you can prove what's happening, but they don't like that. And then they torment, harm you more. And they keep, the coercion is unbelievable what they will do and what they will say. And the crimes I have witnessed are horrific. I mean, my own daughter was told, if you don't give us that child, we will put you in prison, or we'll call the police because your mom gave him away to CPS in Virginia. Knowing that I would never do that, you're in a situation where you just react to the threats to stay safe, and you make bad decisions. But if you don't study constitutional law, there's not much that will come out of your mouth because you're in so much shock.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How old was your daughter when they said this to her?
She is 22 at the time, and she was getting ready for his birthday party, and she was not speaking to me. She's very doting, but she stopped speaking to me because she was afraid that they would remove her from his life too. So she's, very submissive to them, and they act as if they are really good people, and they're basically, I'm not sure what, she snapped out of it twice, where I'm not sure if she's under hypnosis, but she has said things like, Mom, you're so cute. And she starts crying. You can see she's snapping out of it. But then if they are alerted to the fact that we're talking, which they watch and wiretap often, and I have much evidence to that, they will call her immediately, and somehow she won't speak to me again. So I'm not sure what is going on, but initially what Virginia is stating is that they have to keep this boy away from me because he's in imminent danger, because apparently on their criminal complaint that set this entire thing off, they say that I spanked that child in Alabama in our home on November 6, 2020. The criminal complaint was signed by Officer Sean Poveda of the Arlington, Virginia Police, stating that the child had injuries on his arms and leg. But when you look at pictures, there's nothing there. And if he has anything where it's remotely a small little bruise that you can barely see, or a scrape, that's because their police report says that he ran from the police when I couldn't find him. And I called 911 when we entered Virginia after our home had flooded in Hurricane Sally. we evacuated. Our house in our area was in a state of emergency, and I had FEMA applications to help me.
Mhm.
And there is no way that I was living in Virginia like this court and judge want to state, because I would not fraud the federal government with FEMA, applications. That is prison time. So
Mhm.
we definitely were, I call it human trafficked, because they took us involuntarily, gave us like they make us comply to their demands, and they're making money. And they didn't have my son's name or social security number, because they don't know who we are or who he is. They probably knew who I was, but they didn't know who he was. So they have stolen another child's identity, and now he's going under that child's identity, because he was not born in this country. So therefore, when they got him and they held him, they didn't know how they were going to get their funding if he didn't have a social.
So your son was not born in this country.
No.
And oh, this is very I'm so sorry.
Yeah, so they don't have jurisdiction on so many levels. They don't have it because the criminal complaint that set this all off states that the crime happened in Alabama, and nobody has jurisdiction over prosecuting that crime but Alabama. And then they don't have jurisdiction because this is an Indian child, where they made me take DNA, and they know this is an Indian child. And then they don't have jurisdiction because his home state, and in his words, on their forensic video, he states he has lived in Alabama in the same home his entire life. We do have to go to Florida when I was in college, and we did have to go to DC when I get lobbying contracts.
Mhm.
But besides that, we always, maintain Alabama. At first, when he was born, I thought about going back home to California, but it was a short-lived move, and we went right back in the same home.
Mhm.
So they don't have jurisdiction of this child. They don't even know who this child is. All I know is that when they brought him 8 months after hiding him and giving the court of Virginia gave the abductors custody, which they had no jurisdiction, when Maryland, on an emergency order, gave me emergency custody, protection orders, warrants for these people. Alabama said nobody can hide this child or travel this child, and Delta puts them on a plane without looking at a valid order. And they looked at it, but they believed their invalid order. Their order was so invalid that LAX police said this isn't valid. They confirmed that. And just last month, in the trial in Virginia, the family court judge finally said, yeah, that was not a valid order at the time, when that child continues to be trafficked into Virginia. They don't have valid orders. They just have a county attorney named Jason McCandless, who continuously calls different authorities in different jurisdictions to tell them the most outrageous lies, so that they back off from what they're doing to protect us. In a sense, they're telling people, and I heard this when I was at LAX, they were telling the LAX police that this woman is dangerous. She just got out of a mental hospital, and there's a protection order, and her parental rights have been terminated. None of that was true. And the police validated that, but the child was already placed on an airplane to Delta, because Delta ticketing agent believed these people. And so you cannot win when the government county officials continuously fraud at an extreme level to keep bringing that child back to Virginia. I don't even know how more to explain it, but I know recently Tara Rodas, the Department of Health and Human Service whistleblower, said that the government, this agency, is the middleman for child sex and labor trafficking. And you have to understand, it's not just migrant children. The 85,000 or 200,000 missing children now it's not just them, it's the foster care children that nobody wants to speak of in Congress. They too are being trafficked. In fact, 60%, I think the number is greater, but 60% of child sex trafficked or child sex slaves came from the foster care system.
Mm-hmm.
And then Missouri in October 6th of 2021, I believe the federal watchdogs had caught them, so they had to put a trial on where lawmakers in Missouri were asking CPS, why are you calling them runaways when they're not here to tell us they ran away and you didn't see them run? You're turning quote unquote, you're turning children into prostitutes and we don't like it. So they were caught, and all they could give an answer to that was, well, we have done that, but we need more funding, and that will make it stop. The funding, the more funding that goes into this, the more merchandise they need, the more children they need, because that builds more funding for the previous year. The funding doesn't go down, it actually goes up. They are building, like Tara Rhoda said, a child labor and sex trafficking empire. And we have great senators. Senator Jeff Hawley from Missouri is asking the right questions. He's telling this department and the department secretary of Homeland Security, don't tell us you need more funding. That isn't going to work this time. Tell us this is going to stop or resign now. And there are people calling this out. And unfortunately, the focus went into UFOs, and now there's aliens. And I believe that was, the government doing what they do best, distracting the American people to not focus on the real issue. We have a serious issue with child exploitation. We're number one in child porn use in the nation, in the world. Our nation is number one of child sex slavery. So if we have this enormous problem, why hasn't anyone spoken about it besides a handful of Congress members? Why hasn't the administrative branch, mentioned it? Nobody speaks of it. We know Epstein exists. We know what he was doing. We know that his victims are saying that, yes, children were being trafficked into a Midwest state and sent outside the country. We know these people exist. We know, Noreen Gosh, who started the exploited missing children with John Walsh. She's got a child that this happened to, in a sense, where he was taken on his paper route by the same type of people. But you don't take kids on their paper routes anymore. It creates too much national attention. You take them in the guise of child protection through CPS. That way they can hide and not get the attention that it deserves. They can hide the fact of what they're doing. And, she said it best. She hired so many investigators that this is a covert mission to make children child sex slaves in order to frame political people and people of power. And that's basically what, they told us Epstein was doing. And then you had all the videotapes that Epstein had to blackmail these people that somehow during the raid, the FBI forgot to get. And now they're missing. So we cannot focus on fixing a problem when they keep throwing different things at us to distract us. Or, luckily now it's not a conspiracy theory because the department is acknowledging that this is happening. But I don't know how to fix it. And I'm afraid that my child can easily go into that scenario if somehow I don't manage to be able to have a day in court. And every time I try to prove the evidence of no jurisdiction, I'm locked out. The record shows that I'm there or that I didn't show up purposely, but they never say that they lock me out. And when I've tried to hire court reporters to go there for me instead of relying on their court reporters, the court reporters are scared afterwards. They're intimidated, they're threatened, they won't give me, they have it, they won't give me the recorded court trial or the transcripts, because there is so much criminal activity going on in these trials that shows that parents are not getting due process in family courts or in. I was in circuit court with Judge Judy Wheat, who purposely stopped the witness, tampered with my witness when the witness was about to say that we had lived in Alabama 6 months prior to the proceedings. She said it was the satellite that went down, but there would be no way the witness and I could hear each other if the satellite's down, because we were connected through the court and we were having a conversation. And I recorded all that because it was virtual court. But yet those are the type of things where I'm being hacked and disappear from my devices. And because I keep complaining about this, they have now terminated my parental rights because they say I'm delusional because I think I'm being hacked. Now, they have no medical degrees to practice any kind of medicine, psychology, but yet in a court of law, without serving me, or they served me in the wrong address and served me too late on several, where I can't show up because I don't know about it. But on several trials, they act as the, medical experts, tell the court, this woman needs to be terminated. She's delusional. She thinks she's hacked. Well, I have plenty of evidence to show I'm hacked. But yet, that's their preponderance of evidence to remove my parental rights. Meanwhile, I'm in appeals right now. They have forced attorneys on me, even at times when I wouldn't sign their indigent applications, because I had over $100,000 in the bank. So basically, they would force them on me and say, well, you can't have a trial if you don't go with this attorney who will demolish, destroy the case, block the witnesses, block the evidence. At one point, the attorney that they gave me, Karen Hayner, had marked where it said released. A judge released me on this criminal charge from Alabama, where Virginia was trying to get it. They had put me in jail, and he said, released, this is unnecessary, give her back her child. This is a woman from Alabama. No restraints. The state said, please give us a protection order. He said, absolutely not. Where it says no restraints, my own attorney circled it so much that you can't even see in the record that that the judge wouldn't do anything about this. And he was a sub judge. Had it been the normal judge, I'm sure that wouldn't have happened, but nobody clued this guy, what to do. So, I can go on all the schemes that I witnessed, and I'm not supposed to be here. I'm supposed to be, as they wanted to take my child, they wanted to take me too and give me a psych evaluation with their foster care youth psychologist. Her name's Stephanie Tabor. She called me immediately without jurisdiction and demanded I see her, and yelled at me for catching a flight and not talking to her. I didn't know who she was. She was very aggressive. But at that moment, if she talks to me and gives me one question, she can say I'm completely insane and unfit to raise my child. Then in 3 days, if I don't have a will or a conservatorship already set in place, they can appoint me someone who can then say she's not able to come out of this mental hospital. She still needs more time in there. At that point, they can start medicating me, where they start messing with the physiology of my brain and could make me look like I'm insane from what they're giving me. And at that point, you can go to the Virginia Supreme Court and there's special court services, and you can commit someone to a mental hospital. And they kept saying, you need a psych evaluation. But I said, I have a psychiatrist that I've been seeing for 2 years. I have ADHD. I'm well maintained. Any psych evaluation would just take the toll of eventually ending up, if it was that severe, with a psychiatrist. But my lawyer said, that's ridiculous. A psychiatrist doesn't count. He's an MD. And nothing they were saying made sense. And I have this all recorded. If you play back the craziness involved, where my head just kept spinning to the point where I just started having seizures and strokes, because it was mind-blowing that they could take my child, hide him, and tell him all types of things, drug him. He was so drugged that his friends kept calling me saying he's sleeping everywhere and he wants no more friends because he was so depressed. Now, this is children that came from a healthy home. Nobody had depression. Nobody had medical issues. Everybody was an honor roll. We had one college graduate already that was hired to work at a Beverly Hills hotel and with her hospitality degree from FSU. Everybody was doing great, very doting children of their mother. I was the PTA president, the PTA vice president, team mom, room mom. I was on the board for the local park where they played their sports. These things don't happen to people like me, but somehow these people have managed through, unfortunately, the people in California who were complete strangers to my child. One of them is my estranged brother, who teamed up with these people. I feel like they're hate crimes, or it's a form of torture. And maybe when they do this scheme, people do end up in the mental hospital, because it's hard on your psyche to have all these people constantly destroy your life, when all I did was try my best to give these kids the best life possible. I had no help, and that's okay. But to have this much hate crimes and, torture, to take away a child from his home, his dog, his safety, his security, his future, this child will never be the same again. He will never trust. He will never, ever repair from the damage that this child protection scheme did to him.
Right. They say kids are resilient, but I don't think they are when these things happen.
No, and who knows what he was exposed to. I know originally when I started Googling his email, it showed up to a bunch of porn sites. He, like I said, he has not one friend, not one follower. He does all kinds of stuff on social media. Not one person will like it. I mean, he's at the age of 16 where I should be buying him a car, and he should have, all kinds of friends, and he should learn how to socialize. He's definitely missing out on some of the most important lessons in life. And he was the child because the other two experienced a divorce with my ex-husband, who was a Major League Baseball player. And he had, a lot of clout, a lot of favoritism in court, because he brought court to his hometown. But, so proud that this child was not touched or fazed by it or traumatized by this. Yet he's worse off than any child I know, any child in my family, any friends that I have. He's literally been brainwashed. They say that type of level of brainwashing, you just never repair from it. He'll forever think that his mom gave him away. And if I never get to talk to him again, he'll live with that.
That's terrible. That is so horrific. And yet they do this all the time, and people don't realize this, that what happened to you can happen to really anyone.
Yeah. I mean, it's a coercive, it's passing the point where the pressure turns into compulsion, where they have to somehow make that money. I mean, I don't know what the budget is, but I'm sure it's well over, I think I was looking 2022. Let's see, the budget was somewhere in the ballpark around, I can't find my notes, but it is just a ridiculous amount of budget. I'm sorry, I don't know where I left them, but
is it like 25 billion, or probably in the billions, I'm thinking?
it is. I mean, just their budget alone for their discretionary budget, where the funds get to go wherever, just in 2022 is 131 billion. And their mandatory funding is 1.5 trillion, and that's 2022. And then they have their cyber budget is tremendous. I don't know why you have to have so much cyber budgets.
Yeah, that is disturbing.
Right. And I mean, if they really, truly, what their entity was formed to do is to help families who are in trauma or in an emergency, to help them thrive. And this is in the guise of services. But what I'm seeing is they're using the services to put people in the system, because then they have it rigged where the psychologist will say, oh, something's wrong with you. Now you have to lose your child for this amount of time or indefinitely. So these services are not helping. They're actually taking thriving families and doing the opposite of what they were built to do. And just like my family were a prime example, everyone was on a roll, doing well. I had financial security. Now I am, just like everyone else, severely depressed. I have brain injuries, trauma that I don't think I will ever recover from, just like everyone else in my family. And we definitely have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars into this.
And that was all the brain injuries, for the strokes, all of this was caused by the stress of what they put you through.
Yeah, I think if you hear some videos of me begging, like, please let me in, this means the most to me, please let me in, on these court trials where court reporters that I've hired and have been paid have this recording. If you could see the amount of stress that I'm feeling, not being able to share that they have no jurisdiction, that this is an Indian child, that this child has a beautiful life, that the crimes that I'm being accused of did not happen in their state. They don't have standing. I mean, the fact that I did every service they wanted, I did 3 psych evaluations when people would see me, and no one found anything that would suggest an unfit parent. In fact, the only thing was, of course, my ADHD that was being maintained for, a few years prior to them, and adjustment disorder, which means that when they first took my son, I wasn't overreacting because I didn't know how to act. I could not think that this was real, because I had called the police and demanded an internal investigation. And I was given an apology letter that the police acted wrong, that they definitely weren't following the procedures in their training. And basically telling me that this shouldn't have been done to me. Yet CPS doesn't apologize. They grabbed on that and they just kept saying I lived in Alabama. They kept saying that I lived in these concrete lots, that I drove by the addresses that didn't exist. I kept asking who wrote this child affidavit status of where this child lived prior to this. It's waived the signature because of COVID. And that's another thing. Every courthouse in America was closed, but not this. I was the only person in the courthouses and in the jail. There was nobody there. And I mean, what I'm being accused of isn't even an unlawful act. I'm being accused of spanking my child. And that he admitted it, and that I admitted it, and that it happened in Alabama. And here's Virginia, almost in November, it'll be 3 years later, trying to take my child away forever, when I don't even have, right now, as it stands, all orders are closed. And I don't have a child abuse, what would you call it?
Indication?
Yeah, there's no child abuse on my record, nothing. So it almost was like it never happened, but yet they still have the child.
Oh, go ahead.
And when we were in the family court, I remember, I have this recorded, the county attorney, Jason McCandless, and the guardian ad litem, Sean Schmergel, saying basically, we have to take him. She will never stop saying this child was kidnapped. What does that have to do with protecting the child? Because I want an investigation on a kidnapping that I know through penal code is exactly described. There's no missing elements. You can't take a child from a parent and hide that child when that parent has custodial rights. Just as if it was my ex-husband's turn with our child that we have in common. If I would have taken that child out of turn, I would have been arrested. So there's no reason why these people who hid the child for so long shouldn't be arrested. They should be. The FBI, would take my phone calls at our Mobile office, and they'd sit there for hours with me, empathetic, pretending to be investigating, all to get me to the point where time would go by, because in order to terminate a parent, you have to have certain time, like 6 months, we'll check on you again, a year, we'll see if he's still in foster care. Well, they needed all that time to go by in order to be able to execute my family, basically give us the death penalty of our existence and, to each other. So the FBI sat there and acted like they were going to help on this kidnapping and never did anything. And I'm not sure why. It goes again with the fact that Congress is exposing, by whistleblower testimony, FBI agents saying that they're being told to stand down on child sex trafficking. So I'm under the impression that this child, that they have spent millions of dollars in court trials in their state county of Arlington, Virginia, this is only happening because they have plans to make him a child sex slave. Why else would you commit so many crimes? Why else would you spend millions of dollars of taxpayers to try to remove a child and lie so much on the record and not allow the mother due process? Why else would you lie so much about a spanking if you did not have plans and this child isn't going to make them some kind of funding back?
That's exactly.
So I'm sorry.
Oh, you go ahead.
So this is my main reason to want to speak to you, because I want all eyes on when that child, and if that child turns 18 and we cannot find that child, I want all eyes on what the worst case scenario is and what our government has been telling us they're doing. I want to put it on notice that that child is in danger to be sex trafficked, because there's no reason to remove him from a healthy home where there's no drug problems. There's no, in his testimony, my mom was really super nice until I got an F. That's basically what he put on a recording. There's no reason, when there's children in Virginia sleeping on the floor in offices in foster care where they don't have enough houses for them. There's no reason to take a child away from his home state, especially when my best friend, Sarah Rutledge, who's a family attorney, is begging for kinship. She's begged Virginia. She's done anything she can. She's shown up to every meeting. She's a family attorney in Alabama, and she's a guardian ad litem. Why would you turn away a person like that to put him in foster care? And then my father also said he wanted him, but they made it very difficult for him. And then they came back and erased all their emails. I'm not sure how they're doing that. After sending them, they all vanished to hide the communication. And, I've had several people ask me, how can we get him? Well, the Virginia Department of CPS, Health and Human Resources, whatever they call themselves, they have to give the okay for that, but no one is good enough. And I'm not sure why the floor in offices is a better opportunity for a foster youth when 80% of those foster youth, it will be in and out of prison. The pipeline to prison is foster care. There's some wonderful women in Georgia that do a lot of digging and statistics. They don't have children in the system, but they definitely know that poverty plays a huge role and why a lot of these children are taken. They just found the correlation that many of the people in death row were former foster youth. And then we know that 60% or more of sex trafficked child victims came from foster care, where Biden administration hands over $14 million every so often to stop human trafficking. I said, why don't we stop it at the beginning, where social workers or police officers go to jail for fabricating evidence or violating rights? Because if you stop it there, put these people in jail, the number will drop dramatically on child sex trafficking victims. And that could stop this entire problem. But I don't think funding comes if there's no problems.
Right. It's got to be stopped. It's got to be, I know there's a lot of money involved, but the greed at the expense of an innocent child and families that don't see this coming.
Right. I mean, my child is sitting in a home with strangers, basically neglected, wondering, why can't I have my family? Why can't I cuddle with my dog tonight? Thank goodness that they're brainwashing him so much that he feels like he made the decision, which he didn't, but they made him believe that. Because there are some stories that just break my heart of, kids wanting to go home, and then they have that court date where their lawyer has to come and tell them, look, you're not coming home today. There's no reason why, except for the fact that you make us more money in the system. Mm-hmm. So, and those, children, their heart drops and they're so upset because they are being abused. They are being abused in foster care. They are being treated badly. I don't think my child's being treated badly. In fact, I know he's not. I know he has been given a very cushiony situation for one reason, because they are really trying hard to hide what they have done to us. And if you have a child talking to social workers and people at school constantly about this, that could send red flags. Some teacher did send me, without anyone knowing, an essay he wrote where he said that he would kill in a war to not lose his family. Mm. And basically saying that he said children shouldn't be in war. Basically, he would wage war against his own government to not lose his family. And I'm not sure from that moment on what happened, but he definitely has been under some brainwashing techniques.
Mm-hmm. So very sad to do this to a young person, your whole family.
Yeah, I feel bad for, the three siblings love each other so much, and I feel so bad. And the first person to bring it to my attention was my middle son. He said, Mom, my siblings are acting very weird, but that was when they had already been controlled by CPS. Mm-hmm. And I said, what do you mean? He said, listen, he calls my daughter and she says, and she's denying it, but I heard her. She says, remember, Triton, Mom's abusive or we'll block you too. So there's some weird brainwashing going on with, like I said, they're Hansel and Gretel. They're being fattened up, and they're going to meet their demise if I don't work hard enough to stop what's about to happen to them. Mm-hmm. I was about to meet my demise if I would have kept baiting into come to Virginia, take this psych evaluation. They kept, trying to make me do things. In fact, the guardian ad litem, I have it in email, kept saying, look, I need to speak to you. Come to Virginia. I know you're afraid, and I'll hire you security guards. Come to a different courthouse. Why would a guardian ad litem, hire me security guards to come to another courthouse? I said, DC is 5 minutes away. Meet me in DC. And he refused. He said, it's something to help you get your child back. No matter what, everything they did was just dangling that child to try to get me to do what my daughter's doing, whatever they want. And that's not ever going to get us safe. So, right now we're in appeals. I have another appointed attorney because no one in the entire state would take this. Obviously, they're afraid of retaliation. So the person that they gave me, again, was not on the list. He's another overqualified attorney. He was the attorney for the last governor. His name is Carlos Hopkins. He was the head of the department for military for Virginia. He's very high ranked, and it scares me because my last attorney that was forced on me was Karen Hayner, who is, the fraud congressional committee person, really high up there. And I feel that if they're really high up there and they're not practicing it daily, that there are chances where I'll never see my child again, because if he's like Karen Hayner, all she did was block all kinds of witnesses and testimony. And she could have easily said, hey, this child just got to Virginia. He's not been in this state. He's in foster care in a basement right now being drugged up. But she didn't say anything. There was no reason why that child should have been brought to a state. And when I asked the county attorney, how could you legally do this? He said, he was being, what was the word, what we did in the storm when we evacuated. Oh, he said he was being evacuated. I said, from what? There was no natural disaster in California. He said, from you. We heard you were coming into the state. That you don't move a child from a different state because a parent lives in a state that could have possibly spanked him. And in fact, spanking is a lawful act. It's not unlawful to spank your child. So the craziness of this case just continues. The fact that I have overqualified attorneys all the time, never helping me. The only attorney I paid helped lock me out of the courthouse. And I mean, at this point, I don't know how to save my child.
Heartbreaking.
Yes. And it makes me sad. Last month, Congress held, we have a group of foster children who, it's a foster committee of children who are aging out that intern work for Congress. They each got to speak about their, ordeals in the system and ask for policy change concerning their situations. And not one ever mentioned that I had a mom fighting so hard for me. She literally would risk her life. She sold our homes, got all the equity, kept paying into this. Not one mentioned that. And I was surprised that, that there isn't that story already. There were the stories like, I thought I was safe. They told me I would be safe in foster care. I was sexually trafficked. Another one said, I was told, you come from a family of poverty. If you go into foster care, you'll get free college. That one was saying you shouldn't give incentive to have a young person lose their family. There should be help for people. There was another one that said her brother doesn't even call her sister, and it just broke her heart because they separate siblings. There was another one that said a lot of family wanted me, they just couldn't afford me. And if they would make it easier for family to make money instead of foster parents, to be able to raise children, maybe more kinships will happen. But what I don't think what he knew is that they're really trying hard to block the kinships. And there was just so many stories that, they just made me cry, because I wanted to just start all over with them and adopt them all and give them better lives. But because I'm so, I have the void, I can't give my own child the great life he deserves, because he's got to be a statistic now for prison, for mental health issues, and for sex trafficking. And that just kills me.
What are you doing to stay so strong to even talk about this?
Well, I had to experience a lot of trauma. And honestly, the 3 months they haven't been harassing me and intimidating me repaired me a lot. Had they known that if they continue to do that, I probably would have never repaired, because you can't repair when you're constantly, your fight and flight is constantly on high alert. You can't. But the fact that I've had downtime really did help me. And, my goal was to repair, to come back very strong. Right now, I'm part of a mass tort where we are suing the agencies and the governor and the United States, Biden, Kamala, for this basically this trafficking scheme of civil rights violations and in civil RICO. These are crimes committed by several people, in different states. And it's all the same pattern. It's just maybe a little different, but it's all the same. When you're the targeted parent, you're not going to get your child back. And, so many friends along the way said, it's very easy. So-and-so went through this. You just do everything you're supposed to do to give the child back. Well, for some, yes. For me, thank God I have good attorney friends, but they would talk to their other attorney friends and they'd say, this is not one of those situations. They are planning on putting this woman in a mental hospital and she needs to be smart. And so, that's basically what I was warned.
Mm-hmm.
And even though I tried to do their psych evaluations, I wouldn't put myself in a position
Mm-hmm.
where they could, give me Stephanie Tibor, who was already harassing me and yelling and scolding me for not seeing her when no one had they had no jurisdiction. This was already premeditated. She started a little bit too early and coaxing me to get a psych evaluation. They were so aggressive about that there's no question that was the scheme.
Mm-hmm. Now
And thank God there are good people that, I feel that the psychologist I did see in that Virginia area, he's not only a psychologist with the PhD, but he's a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that he was getting upset with them because they kept leaving the door open, like he would change his mind about me, but he never did. And if it wasn't for him and people that are honest, who knows where I would have been.
Mm-hmm. Now, with this mass tort, who's running that?
So it's Save Our Children Truth Commission. And it's a group of parents out of North Carolina. And the reason they have jurisdiction is because RICO is a national conspiracy to commit crimes on individuals to profit. So it gives it national jurisdiction. And if the court wants to say, well, we don't have jurisdiction in this federal court, well, then what court does for all these parents experiencing the same situation, where they try to dismiss us on very frivolous things because we're not lawyers, such as we don't have a wet signature and we're electronically filing. So we are learning a lot, but it seems like the court is trying to work with us. And hopefully, at that moment, when they do allow us to have trials, we can then present the evidence where that was blocked, hidden. We couldn't even go to the court and file with the clerk. She would block it. She would start fights. Then she would turn around and say, this woman's threatening the courthouse. And then, you get a ban from the courthouse. And you can't bring in your phones, so you cannot prove their lies. I have one recording where I'm calling and they're taking away my court date. They have certain Friday motion hearings set with different judges in order to stop corruption within the courthouse. One I was, asked for, I didn't try to file overly. I asked for one, they took it away from me. And I said, why would you do that? I haven't had 15 minutes to explain my side of anything. They said, you've had 2 years. I said, yes, but I'm never allowed to speak. This was the only time. They said, but you can't speak here. You only get 15 minutes. I said, that's more time than I'd gotten in 2 years. So they took it away from me. And I said, don't you believe in karma? What about your children? Don't you wonder? At that point, she started screaming, and it's all recorded. Stop in the courthouse. Stop, screaming at the top of her lungs. This court clerk, her name was Clairvoyant. Then I'm not sure what she told the judge, but the judge immediately issued with that an ex parte order. That means I wasn't around to give my evidence, an order banning me from the courthouse in all levels, not just hers. And I am not allowed to get my records or anything, or come in or see anything or get transcripts. The only way I can file is US mail. And, certified mail has come back. Their certified mail doesn't show up. There's just all kinds of problems with due process.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Now, that was Save Our Children.
Truth Commission.
Save Our Children Truth Commission.
For any other parents who want, I mean, this will continuously keep going, and there's still time for people to join. For any other parents that can't seem to do this, and I wouldn't suggest doing this on your own, and there's not too many attorneys except for Sean McMillan, who is outstanding, who says and claims CPS will violate your rights. It just depends on, you know, like how, if you're going to stop it. And the only way to stop it is with an attorney with a bar license who they listen to. Because if you don't have an attorney, the scheme, the people involved in the scheme will all act like you're the problem. You're the individual with the problem, because the professionals know better. So if you get Sean, they can't say he's, you know, mentally ill. They can't say things about him. And when he presents the evidence, they don't play games with him. In fact, you know, I've listened to depositions where he puts the Los Angeles commissioner for the department in the deposition. Well, he'll ask, on what circumstance can a social worker take a child without court orders? And he says, never. That's not part of our policy, but it happens every day. And unless you have Sean McMillan taking your case on, there's not much you can do. And he does not work in Virginia. And there's not too many people that will go up against the government there. You know, Texas is doing really well with, you know, having lawyers who will, but Virginia, you just, I mean, if there was anybody, trust me, I would have hired them.
Definitely. Because I tried the federal route myself, and the magistrate admitted to not reading my exhibits. So I had to file a motion to have him read the exhibits. So the next day he ruled them irrelevant and dismissed the case.
Wow. Well, we found, if you read statute a lot, we found that the magistrate has no jurisdiction to dismiss any cases. So we basically got dismissed by the magistrate too. And we said, you know, you have no right to dismiss, but then we sent them all in without signing them, wet signatures, which means ink on paper sent to them. We signed them electronically, and it was dismissed because of that. So they're very strict on us. They want us to function like lawyers when our, you know, our laws say that pro se litigants do not have the same standards as lawyers, but they are holding us to that illegally. And we're ready for that. We're ready. We're learning a lot. We know that, you know, there are lawsuits that do, you know, do make news that are won. And, you know, we know that we have been violated. In fact, you know, there's a huge case out of, what is it? Is it, I want to say, I think it is North Carolina, where I can't remember the name, but where he was violent. He was an autistic father. His child was taken away. The child was given back. And you know, they won millions of dollars. They violated all his ADA accommodations, which they did on mine too. They can never say, by locking me out and not letting my advocate come in, at least my advocate, they can never say that they gave me due process. And you cannot terminate anyone's parental rights without due process. So that's where they've messed up, because nowhere in the record does it show after filing for accommodation requests, nowhere in the record did it say they granted it. So they basically, even if they want to act like I was in court when they wouldn't let me in, there's nowhere on the record that's going to suggest that they accommodated and gave me an equal court, which again is not giving someone due process. And when you don't have jurisdiction and you don't have due process, you can't take a child forever. So I'm not sure what this appellate attorney's going to do with my appeals, but there's always the Supreme Court and there's always the federal lawsuits. And in fact, the DOJ has stated in a complaint back to me that they did discriminate against me and did violate my ADA accommodations, or did violate my disability, which is ADHD. Because you can't create all this constant chaos with a person who needs, you know, calmness. In fact, the early meetings where I was like, come see my house in Alabama, it's beautiful, come see this. The CPS is supposed to do these things, but they couldn't do it because they would have to write in the report that our house is in Alabama. So they kind of ignored it. Then they couldn't give me a family planning meeting to work with me on why this child can't come home, they basically said I couldn't concentrate. Well, that's my disability. If you're throwing people like the kidnappers fighting with me at me during a meeting, and you're saying you have to stop it early because I cannot concentrate, that's like saying someone in a wheelchair can't have a meeting to plan where this child could go for safety because they couldn't walk into the meeting with their legs like everyone else. Like my disability is being distracted. In fact, my kids diagnosed me watching Finding Nemo, the little blue fish. They'd say, Mommy, that's like you. And I had lived all my life trying to get through ADHD, not knowing what this is a thing. This is seriously a problem. It is a very big handicap. And I feel like they're targeting those parents because those are the parents. When you are in trauma, when they are accusing you of things that are so beyond understanding, your brain turns to mush. You can't protect yourself. It's just a bunch of scribbles, and you can't make, thank goodness I understood that this was a scheme, but there's not much you can do to protect yourself. You're weaponized and using law against you that you never studied. And therefore you don't know how to protect yourself. And then your brain turns to mush and your child's in danger. And that's how it works. Right. I would do anything to save my child. If they said, sign here, he goes to somebody else that you know and love and trust, I would do it today. But they're not giving me any options. They are just terrorizing us. And then they'll bring everybody who hates you, which is probably my ex-husband and his faithful, loyal, person, Kenny Graham, who has been calling CPS for years, claiming all these awful things I don't do, just to, I guess, benefit his own sickness. So when you have an agency already doing this, bringing in people, not, how many people could be like, she's a great mom, she's amazing, she was a nanny for my kids, she was the team mom, she was the PTA president. If you bring all those people, the story changes. But then you bring people that you don't even allow in your life, that you want protection orders and have had protection orders. You bring those people in, they're not going to paint a good picture of you.
No. And it's always a one-sided interview, I've found.
Yes. One on page 75 of the original 100-page CPS report that came in weeks after they came into my life, after my child had been kidnapped. It says that I'm a prostitute. This person doesn't even know me. Then on page 99, it says that the social worker is very concerned about my mental health because I keep aggressively begging them to feed my child healthy. Well, I know he's kidnapped and maybe I should be, working harder aggressively with the FBI, but I kept begging them in emails like, can you just make sure he doesn't eat processed food? At this point, I'm just begging they don't drug him again tonight to put him to sleep because he's in so much pain. Just, I don't even know what they were giving him, but if you look at pictures of him when he first went into that basement, when he was hidden 8 months and went into that basement, he was getting like breasts, and he was talking in a Mickey Mouse voice when it was getting deep. And I believe it was puberty blockers that he became an experiment for them. And I had never raised my voice. I had never been stern. I had never been scary. But at that point, I don't care if they would have put me in prison. I was very adamant that you better take my child off whatever you're giving him. And they kept saying it was painkillers. I said, why are you giving my child painkillers? They said, because he's growing. In his social media, that, can be recovered. So I'm not afraid to say this because anything you say, they'll remove it from evidence. But in his social media, they would purposely keep medication pills by his nightstand. And there's a video in existence somewhere on one of the broken devices that we could fix the device and it'll show up. He had straight medication freely to be taking, who knows what it was. But I think, being a former pharmaceutical rep, I have trained my children that the active ingredient in those medicines aren't necessarily, I guess, healthy for your body, that active ingredient can have less of what is in there with just the root. Say it's like ginger, why would you take ginger with all kinds of other harmful side effects? So I think I've explained to them, how medicine works and who makes money. And I believe that big pharma needs their profit in this scheme too. And that's why my child was being drugged up so much. And what I hear is a lot of foster youth go through this. And, I don't believe in over medicating anybody.
I'm just so very sorry you are suffering through this. And, I did find the Save Our Children Truth Commission on Facebook as well. So they're there, but how can people reach you if they have any questions?
They can go on LinkedIn, and they can find me under Bea Marnay, Marnay. It shows that I'm a federal lobbyist for foster care youth, and they can message me privately. This is a good way to be able to learn how to protect yourself, because they will block you. And Mel, the person that sits down with us and talks about our cases, she talks to like you're 5 years old in law, which we are like kindergarten law, because we don't understand, because this was never taught in school. In fact, they're trying to get rid of handwriting, so we can't even read the original constitutional laws, or the only way that if you don't have a computer or a printer, the only way you can actually submit some of your petitions in higher courts like the Supreme Court is if you know handwriting. So if they take that all away from you and they don't teach you anything, you're really starting from ground one. So she definitely, she doesn't practice law. She's not an attorney. She definitely makes you understand, like how, for instance, one lesson we got is that medical coding, in order for a hospital to get funding back, has to be coded properly. It can't just be like so-and-so sad. It has to be, -14, but whatever it is. She said legal petitions have to be the same way. If you don't talk about your claim and what happened in a way where you research what that code is, if it's USC 244, 18 USC 244, taking away your rights. Basically, if you don't learn your codes and put it in a paper on what happened to you, you can't just be like, so-and-so made me sad, they won't let me see my child. You have to be able to code it, and that's how you communicate. And so she's teaching us communication, and that's a very valuable thing. And especially when you're not doing the lawsuit by yourself. They're individual lawsuits. You'll have your own day in court, but you're together. So it makes you, it's not the whole, well, that person, there's something wrong with her, because all us professionals see that she's the problem, not us. Well, when you have 30 parents saying, this isn't isolated, this is nationwide, we've experienced the same exact thing, and it's not just us. The professionals say it's us, but we know for a fact, and here's our evidence that was blocked, and we'd like to put it into discovery to show you the recordings of how they blocked us from going into court to fight for our children, how they blocked us from doing their services that they said we refused to do, how they blocked us from having court transcripts to prove what we're saying. This is, what's going on. There is a scheme to block parents to take children.
Exactly. Well, thank you for coming on and all this information you've given the listeners, but don't jump off. Slam the Gavel is a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these family courtrooms. I'm your host, Marianne Petrie, author of Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, and Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth. And coming out soon, Raised by These Wolves, How Federal Court is Failing Families. And please join us again, because I'd like to have you back on, Bea Marnay, in the future, and other exciting guests. You can find me on Spotify, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Apple iTunes, Anchor FM, and feel free to donate and buy me a coffee to help support this podcast. So I totally thank you so much, Bea.
Oh, thank you so much for this opportunity.
Definitely.